If you're in a conversation with someone, be in that conversation with them. You got to stay off that phone. And honestly, that's something that we can probably all stand to get better at, right? Like just not looking at your phone in the middle of a conversation.
Right. I think it can be a gesture. I think a lot of times, I wrap up a lot of my conversations with clients by saying, look, listen, do not ever hesitate to call me. If you have any questions or if you just aren't sure about anything, I want to make sure that you reach out to me. And a lot of times they say, well, I just didn't want to bother you, or, I know you're busy. And I say, look, I understand, but this is my job. I was like, my job is, as cheesy as this sounds, Mrs. Jane, I work for you.
There's a senior who will give a referral to an agent, and an agent will just be like, thanks. And that is it. And is that probably making them feel super important? Is it making them feel like that you actually do care, that you appreciate it? It honestly, it doesn't a lot of the times. And because of that, they're missing out on a huge opportunity. So believe it or not, just a simple, hey, thank you so much. And I just really appreciate you taking the time and referring me. It means a lot to me. And I can't thank you enough. That's a lot different than thanks.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it carries a lot more weight.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
It's just like, man, I really am grateful. Hey everybody, welcome back to Medicare Agent IQ. I'm Raul Gonzalez.
And I'm Oscar Ibieta.
And man, we're gonna continue on. We've been talking about just, the time before last, we talked about 3 ways to make people like you. We're gonna cover 3 more ways. And the reason that this is important, we've talked about this, is when you're dealing with seniors or you're dealing with people who are at doctor's offices or people who could make your life better or make your sales journey easier. You got to make them like you.
Yep, absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
So let's jump right in and just kind of one of the principles is be a good listener and then encourage others to talk about themselves. So let's spend a little bit of time on that. And obviously, becoming a good listener is not. I would say that it should be very natural, but it's not for everybody.
It's not. I mean, I feel like, getting relationships are something that I'm good at. I would say it's probably one of my strengths, but listening, I feel like it's something that I've actually improved on over the last probably 3 or 4 years. I went to Toastmasters. It was Toastmasters that kind of got me into that. And so
Toastmasters got you listening?
Got me listening. Yeah.
Tell me about that.
It's tailored, it's geared towards helping you with your public speaking skills and whatnot, but there were different tasks that were assigned to us throughout each session. And
yeah, that makes sense. And when I think about that, if you are in a place where you have to listen for errors, then you're going to listen a lot more closely, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't only that, like it wasn't errors, but it was just everything kind of in general. And I just felt like I had to be totally engaged from beginning to end. And so my listening skills just improved because I kind of found myself just being a lot more engaged and paying a lot more attention when, beyond that, when I was having conversations with people, a lot of that kind of transferred and translated over to my work life. And so not that I was a very bad listener, I wouldn't say. I just became a much better listener.
Yeah, and you know what? There's extra benefits of listening. So first of all, it's going to be good for building that relationship. People want to know that you care about their situation and that you're actually fully listening when they're talking. And I've honestly, I've even gotten caught to where I didn't do a great job of listening. And so I'm in a conversation with someone and they tell me something and they expect it was like a mic drop moment. And then I didn't give it to them. And when you do that, that's a fail. Again, that's why we listen. Sometimes you don't get it. And I get that. Right. But when you should have gotten it and you failed to deliver on just like oh wow, or give them some kind of feedback, then it's pretty clear that you're not listening.
Right. It kind of just tells them, well, you're not really listening to what I was saying to my story. You weren't paying a whole lot of attention.
Right. How can we avoid that? Stay off your phone. If you're in a conversation with someone, be in that conversation with them. You got to stay off that phone. And honestly, that's something that we can probably all stand to get better at, right? Like just not looking at your phone in the middle of a conversation.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I do it all the time. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I think sometimes we find ourselves trying to multitask, or we're just trying to knock out a lot of different things at the same time. And really you shouldn't. I think it's super valuable if you show somebody that you are paying attention, that they have your full and complete attention in that moment.
Yeah. I think it was my wife who told me, you know, I used to say like, man, I'm an excellent multitasker. And maybe I was when I was younger, but she's like, no, you're not. Like, I'm not. Like and I hate this because when I'm looking at my phone, if you're talking to me, I might say, yeah, if you prompt me for right. Mm-hmm. And I'd be like, yeah. And it could be on anything. And I'm agreeing with just randomness. And so because of that, we've got to do a great job of it. But the places that it can help you in your sales journey is that people are often going to give you clues, and they're going to explain to you what they're looking for without even actually saying it. They might say something in the middle of that conversation, and if you're fully listening, you're going to pick up on it and be able to make really good recommendations and help them to meet their needs. Or it might have been something that wouldn't result in a sale unless you were fully listening. So it's even more important to do.
Yeah, I think you do, when you're listening, you're learning. Right. When you're listening to somebody speak, you're learning a lot about the person. And if it's somebody that maybe you're just engaging with them and it's going to be a one-time thing, or whether it's that, or if it's somebody that you actually are going to have an ongoing relationship, whether it's a friendship or a work relationship, I think when you're a good listener, you start to learn a lot about the individual, and that's going to strengthen and improve your relationship with that person, because now you know what their interests are, or you know what it is that they don't like. And just like you said, when you're in that Medicare appointment and you're listening to somebody speak, they're going to tell you what they're interested in, and they're also going to tell you what they don't like, and you know exactly what it is that they're looking for. It helps you make a better recommendation for them, and it brings more value to you, again, as an agent in this case. And you're able to make a better recommendation, which that is going to lead to higher retention.
Right.
It's just because if you make a bad recommendation, or if you're just going off of, you know, what you think might work for them without actually taking the time to listen to them, the likelihood of that client sticking is probably a lot lower than it would be if you actually took the time to listen and made a good recommendation.
When you become friends, and yeah, absolutely. You know what, you're right. I think about there's people who they've been given a clue in the middle of an appointment and they just completely miss it. A clue that would have saved them a rapid disenrollment or something like that. Because they're just kind of skipping over and wanting to get to that next point where they tell you, yeah, man, it's kind of frustrating. Sometimes I'm at my doctor's office and I don't see them, for 4 hours, or I don't see them at all anymore. And because I've got a PA and I don't really care for that PA's attitude or something like that. But you're skipping over it and not paying attention, and you lose that sale because they told you they didn't like their doctor. They ran into someone at a new doctor's office and they had an agent there that recommended a different plan. So we've got to fully listen. And then the other part of that in this same principle is encourage others to talk about themselves. We've talked about this many times before. People love their favorite subject, which is themselves.
Right.
And so because of that, it's important for us to encourage that. How do you encourage it? Not just be like, hey, tell me more about yourself, but ask them questions about things that they've mentioned. Like, hey, or if you're looking around and you notice that they have like pics of their kids. We've talked about this before. If you see pics of people's kids, that's something that they're going to talk about. You could ask them, hey, tell me about I notice you have on your phone, you've got pics of your kids, or how many do you have? And once they tell you how many they have, then ask another question about that. So, do they play sports? No. So you can kind of read that conversation. Usually there's going to be a subject that you can bring up that people in general are going to love. It's when you can when you're kind of probing for different things to ask without, and it's got to be smooth. Like you can't just be like, well, what about this? Like make it smooth. But there's going to be a subject that all of a sudden people can't help but talk a whole bunch about.
You got to look for those clues, right? And you've got to, sometimes we've heard the term looking for hot buttons, right? Trying to find out what it is that they're interested in, and then just kind of going from there, but without forcing it. It's got to be natural. And like we discussed in the last podcast or the one before, I don't remember, it's got to be genuine, right? In addition to that.
Be like, what do you do for a living? You know, if you meet them at a doctor's office, hey, you know, how long have you been working here? Oh, I've been working here for 10 years. Oh yeah. I guess you love it, right? To be here for 10 years. You can start just asking more and more questions, and it makes people like you more if you're asking them questions about themselves. So on to the next, talk in terms of other people's or of the other person's interests. And so how do we do that? You know, like if a person is into fitness, you can ask them questions about another subject and how it relates to something that they're very interested in.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking, you know, I know early on when I was getting started in the business and I was doing those face-to-face appointments and I'm walking into homes, you know, sometimes I'd walk in where somebody, you know, was in the middle of finishing up, you know, maybe they just cooked breakfast because the kids were home, or they were taking care of the grandkids for the summer and they just finished cooking breakfast. I mean, even to the point where they'd offer me, you know, if I wanted anything to eat. But, you know, I could just tell that they had a passion for cooking, or maybe they weren't even cooking. Maybe it just smelled like food. I was like, hey, it smells good in here. What do you have cooking? And so it just kind of opens up the conversation, but you know, which kind of ties into the previous principle, but at the same time, it's something that they're interested in. It's probably something that they would want to get excited to talk about. And then you could just figure out ways to connect with them and just maybe tell a story from your childhood. I remember growing up, you know, my mom used to make the same dish and you know, early on we had it over and over and I would just get tired of it. But now that you know, when I went off to college, I didn't realize how much I loved it and I missed it. And you just find common ground. But again, we're talking about a topic that they are interested in.
Absolutely. I think there's a way also to bring it back to the subject that you're on. So like if you're in a Medicare appointment and someone mentions, you know, speaking of, you know, food is harder to do, right? But
it couldn't be. I mean, there's some of these plans have that meal benefit, you know, when you're discharged from so I might make a lighthearted joke and say something like, well, you know, you do qualify for a meal benefit if you're discharged from a hospital. Now they're not going to bring you this amazing soup that you're cooking right now, or, you know, they're not going to deliver, you know, Chick-fil-A or anything like that. Yeah. But, you know, and again, I think that's kind of the point that you were trying to make there, right? Something like that.
Yeah, we just try to bring it back into, use their interest to kind of get them more interested in what we're talking about, right? So in the same way, like if back to the gym idea, that, you know, if they mention that like they enjoy working out, and like, man, let's talk a little bit about the benefits under this plan. You've got that silver sneakers, or you've got that gym membership, and it's available at no cost. It's really cool, but can you kind of think of it like what kind of exercises do you like to do? Oh man, well, I love to play pickleball. Well, here's the cool thing. This particular plan has a gym with pickleball courts. But the cool part about it is you're not just stuck to that one gym. Like you could actually go to play pickleball on Monday, and then on Wednesday you like this particular yoga class, go in and do that yoga class on that Wednesday. So you can really, you're able to kind of bring it together and use their interest to kind of get them more interested in something else.
Yeah, I mean, and again, pick anything, but it all comes down, like another example could be over-the-counter benefits. Maybe you've walked into the home and they've got a little bit of a cough or something. You can say, well, you know, this plan includes an over-the-counter benefit where you can go and actually, instead of using the money that's out of your own pocket, you can use the money that's built, the credit that's built into this plan to purchase, you know, some cough medication or whatnot. But it all comes back to being that listener. And I think early on, we see this a lot of agents when they're getting into the business, they get caught up in that sales pitch and what their next line is going to be. And you're going to find out really quickly that that's not the way to do it. You've got to sit back and listen, ask the right questions and open up the conversation, let them talk, get to listening, and you can make that recommendation.
I think talking about people's hobbies, talking about what their passions are, and trying to understand what their passions are, figuring out like what are your concerns just in general, and then also what are your concerns with your health and with your health plan. And so as you get to know people better, if you get to know like what's important to them, and you spend, and I always tell people like in a warm-up conversation in one of these Medicare appointments where you're in a warm-up, definitely spend 15 minutes getting to know them if they will allow it. So everyone is, it's inevitable. Like we'll have an appointment where people clearly don't want to talk. Right. They're like, I don't really feel like talking right now. So you try to ask them a few times or a few questions that are off subject, and then just immediately they shut it down. So obviously there's going to be situations like that. And when I say it never fails, like it's always when I take someone, I'm like, a new agent, I'm like, you got to have this conversation. You got to have a warm up. And then you ask people, so do you have kids? Nope. It's just like this awkward silence, and then you just so then what I tend to do is I'll ask another question, or like, man, I noticed that car out front. You're driving a Tesla. How do you like it? It's good. You just like take a hint. They don't want to talk, and that's okay also. But when you have an opportunity every other time outside of that, take those 15 minutes, get to know them, find out what's important to them, because it opens up a lot more of that conversation to really find what their needs are, what's important to them.
Yeah, and there's a much deeper meaning behind that. If you take the time to go through that warm up and you have a solid warm up, you have a good warm up session, again, there's so much more that goes beyond that, and that's going to lead to a lot more retention, because like you mentioned, right, they can then become your friends, and you walk out of that room, out of that home, and you've earned their trust, they've earned your trust, and so that's going to create a much longer relationship, and it can lead to more loyalty, which is going to lead to higher retention, which is going to lead to referrals. I think many times we get caught up in just making the sale, and we're just looking for that next transaction. But if you take the time to go through that warm up, I promise you that it's going to lead to retention, it's going to lead to loyalty, and those referrals, they're going to start pouring through. And I think that's the easiest way to get some business in this business, right? And really in any line of business is referrals. And if you can generate organic referrals without having to work hard for them or pay for them, gosh, I mean, you're in a good place.
It drives your cost per sale down, right? And so if you are likable, if you're good at this, and you make people feel special or important, which is our next one, then it's going to really drive down your cost per sale. Let's move on to the next one real quick, and it's the last one of the day, and it's super important. It's make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. So let's chat about that. I want to take you back real quick. So about, I don't know, like 15 years ago, I was on my way to an appointment to meet with my pastor of a church, and so he was about 10 minutes late to our meeting. And he sent me a text when he was on his way. He was like, hey man, I'm just running late. I will be there any minute. Just give me a minute. And so as he arrives, he jumps out of his car. He's like, I am so sorry that I was so late. And he starts kind of explaining like it was this, and this. And I, usually would never be late. And I was like, I don't care. I was like, it's not a big deal. It's 10 minutes. And he's like, no, it is a big deal. After I said it's not a big deal, he was like, no, it is a big deal. He's like, your time is important, and I'm sorry that I missed it. And I was like, man, I really appreciated that.
How'd that make you feel?
It made me feel pretty important. It made me feel like my time is valuable to him. And I think that people tend to, especially when we're dealing with seniors, people tend to do a bad job of caring about that senior's time, because people are like, well, you're retired, right? So like you'll be fine if I show up an hour late and things like that. But if we can go out of our way to, especially in that type of situation, to make them feel like, man, I'm so sorry that I was running so late. Normally I wouldn't do that to you, wouldn't leave you hanging. But man, believe it or not, and give them the reason. Like I was in an appointment with someone right now, and I couldn't get them to stop talking without being rude. I'm so sorry. I really apologize. And if you can do that, and you do it sincerely, then it's going to make them feel important. It's going to make them feel like, oh, okay, you're not just like everybody else. Like you're not like the cable guy who's telling me, I'll be there between sometime during the day. Right?
Yeah, at any time on this date, make sure you're home.
Yeah, and there's other ways to make people feel important, like just in general in relationships, asking people what they think about a situation. Just kind of curious. wanted to get your thoughts. I think I really value your opinion and your wisdom. You know, what do you think about this situation? And so it goes a long way to make people feel important.
Yeah, and you know, I asked you just a minute ago, right? How did that make you feel? And you said it made you feel good. It made you feel important. I think the goal should be, I always kind of operate in this mindset, is switch shoes with them, trade shoes. And how would you feel if you were on that end, or what would you like to feel? You know, what would you desire? And I think it always feels pretty good when somebody makes you feel important. So figure out a way, find a way to make somebody feel important when you're having a conversation with them, when you're in a meeting with them, or whatever it may be. But just show them that you value their time, that you value the conversation that you're having with them, and it's not just another, you know, transaction, or I'm ready to get this over with and move on to the next.
Yeah, you know, I think about right now, there's a senior who will give a referral to an agent, and an agent will just be like, thanks. And that is it. And is that probably making them feel super important? Is it making them feel like, you know, that you actually do care, that you appreciate it? It honestly, it doesn't a lot of the times. And because of that, they're missing out on a huge opportunity. So believe it or not, just a simple, hey, thank you so much. And I just really appreciate you taking the time and referring me. It means a lot to me. And I can't thank you enough. That's a lot different than thanks.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it carries a lot more weight.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
It's just like, man, I really am grateful. And so things like that make people feel important, but there's other ways to within that to make people feel important. It's just showing gratitude for what they're doing, just making sure that you're spending that time, in these conversations, just really letting them know how important they are to you.
Yeah, no, and I'm just trying to think. My mind is just, I've probably got this blank stare on my face, but I'm just trying to think of different examples or place, you know, times where I've done that, where I've made somebody feel important. I mean, I think about my parents. They own a restaurant here in town, right? It's a small mom and pop operation, and they've got the staff that they've got. They've been working with my family for probably over a decade now, and I appreciate everything that they do for my parents, and I appreciate their loyalty to my parents, to my family. And so randomly, whenever I drop in, sometimes I'll just maybe give them like a random gift card to a grocery store or something, or around Christmas time, you know, I'll give them something just a little bit extra, just to show them. And it's a token of my appreciation, person who doesn't even work there or with them on a daily basis. But I feel like that it's me telling them that I truly care about them and that I appreciate everything that they're doing for my parents. And so I feel like that just goes a long way. I think it's just, it can be a gesture. I think a lot of times, you know, I wrap up a lot of my conversations with clients by saying, look, listen, do not ever hesitate to call me. If you have any questions, or if you just aren't sure about anything, I want to make sure that you reach out to me. And a lot of times they say, well, I just didn't want to bother you, or, you know, I know you're busy. And I say, look, I understand, but this is my job. I was like, my job is, as cheesy as this sounds, Mrs. Jane, I work for you. And if you ever have any questions, please do not hesitate to call me. That's what I get paid to do, and I'm here to do that for you. And I know that makes them feel good. It makes them feel important, and it's going to make them think of me the next time that they're in a conversation about their insurance, or the next time they're around friends and family members. They're going to be much more inclined to recommend me to them, as opposed to somebody who doesn't answer their phone, who doesn't return phone calls, who, you know, isn't willing to be as helpful. So it's just doing, and that's just a gesture. It's not anything that I'm not, in my opinion, you know, I'm not going above and beyond. I feel like the way that I operate, I feel like I'm doing my job.
Right. Yeah. And if we could figure out a way to do that as agents, where we're making every interaction, everybody that we talk to feel important, we're going to get more referrals, and we're going to get people to want to work with us and be like, man, you know what? I want to call this guy because he's always gonna take care of me afterwards, and just even if like someone from a doctor's office who's gonna refer business, I want to go with these people who make me feel important. And so there's just ways to hopefully use how to get people to like me, and then use that also toward my business. So everybody, thank you so much for listening. We're going to go ahead and wrap up right there. Just really want to encourage people to understand that there are real ways to build relationships. And I was one of those people who was like, man, maybe I'm just not that likable, or maybe I'm not good with relationships. And then over time, really been able to figure this out. And it's because I cared enough to figure it out. And I think that's the important part, right? Like if you care about building genuine relationships, getting people to like you, then there is a way for you to do it, even if it's not your personality, maybe isn't the most likable, like kind of the way I was, like maybe very opinionated and all that, but that doesn't matter. Like we can strive to get better at relationships, and it's going to benefit you quite a bit. So you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, there are a lot of pieces that go into this puzzle of being successful, whether it's in work or whether it's in life or both, right? I feel like this is one important piece to that puzzle. So if it's not one of your strengths, we encourage you to work on that. And if it is one of your strengths, we encourage you to build on that.
Sharpen that tool, right?
Make it never stop growing, never stop learning, and do everything that you can to continue to sharpen that tool.
Yeah. So until next time, just go out there and put some of these into action.